Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I am Ross McCorkle, and above me here on the screen, as always, is my co-host, Joe Clark. Joe just got a little time away, escaped to the sunny Arizona, and I think he brought some of that nice weather back with him. You said, what, it's almost 70 degrees there in Boston. It's almost 80 degrees here in Nashville. The weather's heating up, and so are the trade rumors, the free agency rumors, actual hard news, stuff to talk about in the Steelers world. It's the time for speculation is in the past. Now we are in kind of the fun part of the year, at least for a bit here. It will kind of die down before too long, but the last couple days have been a whirlwind. Of course, in today's episode, we will talk about the DK Metcalf trade, the Sunday surprise for the second year in a row. We're going to talk about the free agent quarterback situation and how the Steelers' options are really kind of limited to two people, it seems like, at the moment. And then we'll just kind of recap the rest of free agency before moving into some viewer questions. If you want to have a question answered in a future episode, that number's at the bottom of the screen. It's 412-254-3145. Give us a call and leave a voicemail, or you can text the line. If you don't want your voice on the show, that's fine. Just let us know who you are, where you're from, and your question, and we will answer that. Before we get into our topics, Joe, how are you doing?
Good. Like you said, warm weather here, kind of nice. But last 2 days, super busy. Excited to see how the rest of free agency goes.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just go ahead and dive right in on Sunday evening. And that's exactly when the Russell Wilson news was announced by Russell Wilson on Twitter last year, Sunday, the evening before legal tampering period began. And so the Steelers got another tampering period eve surprise with, and this one was quite a bit bigger in my opinion, in terms of they traded for DK Metcalf. They gave up a second round pick and they signed him to a 4-year extension on a $33 million per year average in new money. That evens out to 5 total years for $150 million if you include the last year of his current contract. And they made him the highest paid non-quarterback in team history. And so, big, huge move, something that's kind of precedent changing for the Steelers. Omar Khan's been aggressive, so I guess it doesn't come as a huge surprise. But the days of Kevin Colbert not spending in free agency are over. I guess this technically wasn't free agency, but you get it. You get what I'm saying. Joe, your initial reaction to the trade. Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you lukewarm? Where are you at?
Yeah, I was super surprised just because there's the reporting that DK wanted warm weather. He wanted to go somewhere with a stable quarterback situation, two things that Pittsburgh did not provide. But in general, yeah, I really like it. He's a guy that, even last year, there were some rumors floating around. He's a guy that I think the Steelers have probably had their eyes on since last year. So um, I think had even if George Pickens stays, you add another top quality receiver, even though they have a similar skill set. I think they can work fine in tandem together. And if George Pickens leaves, I think you have a guy that has really high level production and has proven that he can be a number one receiver in the league. So I'm excited about it. We'd have to figure out who is going to throw him the ball, but I think that he definitely makes the Steelers better and he makes the offense a lot better. So excited for sure, and curious to see kind of where it leads now with what happens to Pickens and who the quarterback will be.
Yeah, like you said, who the quarterback is will be the big question. I think there's an argument to be made. Right now, I guess this is kind of getting ahead of ourselves. We'll talk about the quarterbacks in the next topic, but Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers appear to be the two kind of main options. And I guess there's an argument to be made now that, naturally, DK Metcalf, Russell Wilson, the connection from the Seahawks. Like you said, Metcalf's been productive, but the 3 most productive seasons of his career were with Russell Wilson. In 2019, 2020, and 2021. Those were the first 3 seasons of his career. He's remained productive since then. He hasn't fallen off. His yards have remained at or above 1,000 per season. But the big thing that took a dip without Russell Wilson was his touchdown production. So he is kind of a deep ball guy. The last couple of years, he hasn't, if you look at the advanced metrics, he hasn't been a huge separator. He hasn't been great in contested catches, which is kind of surprising for a 6'4", 235-pound specimen. He could probably stand to be a little better in those contested catch situations. And I think he's had better success with that in the past, but the last couple of seasons weren't so good in that stat for him. So But a lot of his productions kind of come on the deep ball, and that's obviously what Russell Wilson excels in. He knows exactly what it's like to catch a moonball from Russell Wilson, how to adjust to those balls in the air, what they feel like, how they're dropping, that kind of thing. All that matters. So I think there is an argument to be made that maybe at this point, Russell Wilson is the better option. Like I said, we'll get to the quarterback discussion here in a second. But Joe, do you think that this does push Pickens out? Do you think what do you think happens with Pickens? Do you want to see that duo, or are you on the kind of team of, well, we better get some value back in return for Pickens because he's only here for 1 year anyways? What camp are you in there?
Yeah, I think I want to see the two of them together and see what the offense looks like with the two of them. I mean, I can understand the argument for trading him, especially if you can get a third, because you gave up the second for Metcalf, so now you can, maybe you get a better third, and it's not you're not waiting as long between picks. You take advantage of a deep draft in the middle rounds there, but I'm excited. I mean, the Steelers, the whole thing, we wanted to see them upgrade their wide receiver room next to Pickens and add somebody next to Pickens. And so now if they trade for a guy like Metcalf, and well, then it's just Metcalf, like, yeah, sure. He has been better than Pickens. He has more production over the course of his career. So you could argue that it's still a little bit of an upgrade, but I'd really like to see the two of them work together. Now, the question is Pickens going to be happy that they went and paid somebody else and haven't and probably are not going to pay him? And is he going to ask out? And if he asks out, that's a whole other issue because you don't want Pickens there if he's unhappy. But I could also see it maybe motivating Pickens and having him be like, all right, like I haven't done enough here to get paid. I haven't acted the right way. And maybe this kind of gives him that sense of motivation. And then I think if you keep him and then things aren't working out throughout the course of the season, you leave yourself open to being able to trade him at the deadline. So I wouldn't love the idea of trading him now if he doesn't want out. I think the two of them could work together. I mean, even with Rodgers and Wilson, they're not, the most exciting options, but both of those guys still have a pretty decent deep ball at this point in their career. And I think that both Metcalf and Pickens could succeed and thrive in the same offense.
Yeah, deadline deal might make some sense. It's just the fact that they'd only get, I guess, 7 or 8 games out of him. He would be entering unrestricted free agency. So, I don't think you'd get a ton in return for him, but maybe there's a team that's desperate. I mean, the Steelers were in a situation last year where if a guy like George Pickens was out there, maybe they would have overpaid for him just a little bit at the deadline. I don't know, but it is an interesting thought. My kind of thought process is I absolutely want to see Pickens and Metcalf on the field together. I think it would be a injustice if we don't get to see that at this point. And I mean, two dynamic kind of deep threats. Pickens maybe is a little better in the contested catches. DK Metcalf maybe a little better in terms of the yards after, and just kind of has maybe a hair more speed than Pickens to kind of break away the big play. Metcalf's kind of has the touchdown production. I think overall, Pickens to me isn't a huge step down from DK Metcalf. I mean, the touchdown production hasn't been there for Pickens, but I think, Pickens was on pace to be a top 5 receiver last year in terms of yards if he hadn't gotten injured. I think the last 5 games he only had like something like 50-something yards total because he was injured for 3. He did nothing in one of those 2 games at the end of the year, and I think he had like 52 yards in the other. And so he was on pace to be, a top 5 guy and kind of take that next step. And so leading up to this trade, I was kind of on the team of I don't want it to be Metcalf just because of some of those advanced metrics I told you about earlier. Now I'm like, okay, I'm at least intrigued. I can get behind, they gave him a 5-year deal. So what am I going to say? He's around. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. They've kind of tied themselves to him for the foreseeable future. And, maybe at this point he might be a Steelers lifer for the rest of his career at this point. How old is he? He's 27. So by the time his contract's up, we're talking about a 35-year-old, or sorry, that's terrible math, 32-year-old. And so, yeah, he's going to be around, and I am intrigued. I think the Pickens-Metcalf combo obviously gives you an excellent passing game that the Steelers haven't had. I mean, when's the last time that the Steelers had 2 receivers of even remotely this kind of caliber? I'm trying to think. I mean, I guess the first year of Juju with Antonio Brown, maybe, but Juju didn't end up being all that. I think both Pickens and Metcalf are better than Juju. So do you have to go back to Hines and Santonio? Or, I mean, Hines and Antonio Brown were technically on the same team, but not really while Antonio was any good. Um, I guess it would have to be Hines and Santonio, or Hines and Plexico, or one of those kind of combinations in the early 2000s, or early to late kind of 2000s there. So it's it doesn't make a ton of sense to me because the Steelers have been kind of angling themselves towards being run first. Now they have this like potentially high flying passing attack, and what does that mean? Are they actually going to evolve their game plan to reflect that, or it's kind of confusing to me overall. But Joe, do you think that they're actually going to unleash the passing game?
I think they kind of have to at this point, right? I mean, especially with what the running back room is probably going to look like. I'm sure you have some faith in Jalen Warren, but you have a rookie and probably a minor free agent addition behind him. So, and you have, the two top receivers right there. So I think you're kind of have to evolve a little bit. I mean, you can also argue that those two guys can help open up the run game a little bit, but I think you have to evolve and take advantage of having, arguably one of the best wide receiver duos in the league.
Yeah, we've seen George Pickens be a monster in the blocking game when he wants to. He can absolutely pancake guys, and DK Metcalf obviously has what it takes to do that. I think we saw him manhandle Joey Porter Jr. once or twice when they played against each other. And so, yeah, I think they can be kind of the mold of receiver that the Steelers are looking for in terms of involved in the running game and the passing game, and so I think it's a plus all around there. There's going to be some kind of consternation about the value of paying him 33 in new money, which I believe makes him the third highest paid. Really, if you take into account the final year of his last deal, it's 30 per year, which is the fifth highest paid, tied for the fifth highest paid. But that new money that they gave him is the third highest paid receiver in the league. People look at that and they're like, is he really? I mean, I wouldn't have put him anywhere in the top three or probably top five if you had asked me a week ago. So that is fair. However, it is important to realize, the salary cap is only going up. The contract values are only going up. You're looking at Jamar Chase probably resetting the receiver market above $40 million per season whenever that happens, sometime over the next, I guess, 6 months before the season begins. And when that happens, you're going to have a bunch of receivers trying to cash in on that market being reset. I mean, we've seen it before with Tyreek Hill trying to get a new deal immediately after signing a big deal, like the next year, looking for more money. And so that kind of thing's going to start happening. And honestly, if DK Metcalf does well, he could be one of those guys because at 33 per year, he could end up being extremely undervalued relative to the market, especially given that this is a 5-year deal. I mean, we could be talking about, in 5 years from now, the wide receivers could be getting paid $45 or almost $50 million, which is crazy to think about. But so I guess that's kind of where I'm at. Joe, where are you at on the value?
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, you get it done now, and like you said, Jamar Chase is going to reset the market. There's going to be a rush of, a bunch high new money deals for receivers. So I think having that kind of locked in now with Metcalf, he'll still be up there. He'll still be very well compensated. But I mean, by the end of this offseason, he's not going to be number 3. By then, in next offseason, it might not even be in the top 10. So I'm very comfortable with giving him the money right now. Especially because, I mean, I don't even know if we've seen the guaranteed figure on it.
I don't think so.
So we don't even, so who even knows what the true value of that money is going to be, how much that is incentives or whatnot. So I think as it stands right now, the contract is, like you said, maybe a little more than I would have given right now. But given the fact that other guys are going to start getting paid, it's going to look a lot better a year from now than maybe it does right now. So I'm not really concerned about the value. I mean, the Steelers have the money to spend. They've had the money to spend, and now they're finally spending it. So it's good to see.
Yeah, kind of what they didn't do with TJ Watt. They kind of got beat to the punch so far with TJ Watt. Myles Garrett getting that massive $40 million APY extension, and then Max Crosby got what did he get? 33, I think. 30,
Yeah, I think
somewhere in that ballpark, and then or no, it was 35 and a half, I think, for Crosby. If I don't know, but Myles Garrett reset it to 40, so Crosby's number is kind of irrelevant at this point. Watt is going to be looking presumably for top of market value there, and so what the Steelers failed to accomplish with TJ Watt, they kind of did accomplish with DK Metcalf, in my opinion. And so I think it's going to look like a very good deal as long as Metcalf stays healthy, and as long as, of course, the Steelers can find him a quarterback, which moves us into our next topic, and this is kind of the big one, and we're going to be stuck in kind of purgatory or quarterback hell until something gets announced. Of course, Adam Schefter's on NFL Live about an hour ago saying, well, Aaron Rodgers is going to take some time to decide. It could be an hour, it could be a day, it could be a week. I pray that it is not a week. That sounds like not a good time for anybody involved. But bottom line is, it's coming down to Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. Are they going to run it back with Russell Wilson? Are they going to go with a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers? Joe, where do you want to start here?
Yeah, I mean, I think losing out on Justin Fields really limited their options here. Fields got 2 years, 40 million, 30 million guaranteed from the Jets. Steelers probably don't want to go that much, which is understandable. But still, you put yourself in a very unenviable position now. I mean, I don't think either guy really raises your ceiling at this point in their careers. We saw what we got out of Wilson. Obviously now the Metcalf connection adds a little bit. I mean, you improve the receiving corps, the quarterback play. You can expect to be a little bit better. And if it is Wilson, then it's year two in the system. But I mean, we heard there's a tension between him and Arthur Smith at the end of the year. If they bring him back, that's something that has to be resolved. And Rodgers, I mean, last year just didn't look that great with the Jets in terms of his mobility. His arm's still there, but he's not mobile, and so you really worry about him being able to move behind a Steelers offensive line that really don't really know how that could go. I mean, Robert Jones going to the left side for the first time in his career. I mean, he's had his struggles at times. So the offensive line play, I think, is really paramount, especially with Rodgers. It is with Wilson as well, but especially with Rodgers. And so that scares me a little bit. I mean, I hate to be a pessimist with either guy. You're probably looking at 9-8, 10-7, and a wild card round loss again because I just at this point in the AFC, I don't think either guy is going to be a ceiling raiser to get you to that next level. But they need somebody. They need a bridge quarterback, and it's going to be one of those two guys. I think right now, um, I think it'll probably end up being Rodgers. I think he's talked about Mike Tomlin and his reverence and respect for him, and joining a ready-made situation in Pittsburgh probably beats going to the Giants where yeah, they have some guys and they've added in free agency, but you're probably not going to. I think maybe like 6, 7 wins is probably what you're looking at. So I think Pittsburgh is probably what makes most sense for him.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I fall in this. I've kind of gone back and forth multiple times at this point. I mean, I've talked about it on this podcast before. I think Russell Wilson showed us that he could do what was needed at times last year, and that's not just something that happens by accident over the course of it is if it's like 1 or 2 games, but Russell Wilson had a good 5 or 6 game stretch where he looked ready to go, and people were kind of talking about this team as a deep playoff kind of contender caliber team, and part of me wants to believe that that's possible, especially if the kind of the team is upgraded around him. They didn't put him in the best situation last year. But the other part of me is like, okay, Aaron Rodgers, I mean, he gets rid of the ball faster. He's going to make that offensive line look better because of it. He's not going to drift into as many sacks as a guy like Wilson. I think Wilson has kind of held onto the ball for like close to 3 seconds, most of like 2.9, kind of that range, 2.93 for the last few years on average. Aaron Rodgers is more of like a 2.6 second kind of guy, 2.65 second kind of guy. So he's getting rid of the ball faster. That might not seem like a lot of time, but man, football's the game of inches, the game of milliseconds. And so that is actually a ton of time. The offensive line doesn't have to kind of, block for that long, and that's going to make them look better. So part of me, I think there's kind of pluses and minuses to both. Rodgers is probably the better thrower, but if the Steelers are really just going for this big deep ball thing where it's moonball to Pickens, moonball to Metcalf, and they're not going to use the middle of the field and stuff like that, then yeah, go ahead and just run it back with Russell Wilson. He's the moonball king. I don't think anything's changed there. I think he's probably a better deep ball passer than Rodgers at this point. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think you were kind of leaning towards Fields. I think I'd come around on Fields, but wasn't totally sold at the price point that he got. Wouldn't have been comfortable with that number that he got in New York with $30 million guaranteed. So at this point, we're just kind of along for the ride, and we'll see what happens. It seems like the Steelers are prioritizing Rodgers. Will Russell Wilson even want to sign with the Steelers by the time this is all said and done? Effectively being their third choice. I mean, is he going to feel like Kenny Pickett last year by the time this thing's done? I think that's a possibility, especially for a guy who's kind of a Hall of Fame career. I mean, he has a Pickett didn't even have a reason to be upset. Russell Wilson maybe kind of does. So, yeah, I guess we'll just see how that pans out. There's not a ton else to be said about that situation. Other than, I guess one more thing I did want to say is Russell Wilson's best numbers of his career were working with Metcalf and guys like Tyler Lockett. And so if you bring back Russell Wilson, you can also bring in Tyler Lockett. He'll be cheap. He's older. He doesn't have a ton to offer at this point, to be honest. The advanced metrics aren't pretty, but he has been shorthanded. There is the chemistry with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson called him one of the best toe tappers ever. I would argue Antonio Brown's got to be in that conversation, but Tyler Lockett could be an interesting guy to get the band back together. It would certainly. I don't think it's the right move, because then you're pushing down Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin III and getting them less reps, which probably isn't the right move, especially if you're kind of looking towards the future of this team. But it could be, it would make for interesting TV, I guess. So moving into the rest of free agency, where do we want to start? The Steelers lost some guys. They have reportedly signed one guy, reportedly maybe signed another. Joe, where do you want to start?
Yeah, so the first news that sort of broke yesterday in terms of the Steelers bringing somebody in was when they signed Darius Slay, or agreed to terms with Darius Slay. But then it kind of Tom Pelissero pushed back, and no deal was signed. The Steelers were talking to him. Then Jerry Dulac reported it was done. Jordan Schultz was the first who said it was happening, and then Mike Florio came in and said no, it's not done. Which it wasn't ever officially done because he hadn't been cut by the Eagles yet. It won't be cut till I guess tomorrow after the new league year on Wednesday. But now it seems as if Florio came out with a new report today that the Eagles might try to squeeze trade compensation out of him. He's like conditional seventh, whether it's the Steelers or somewhere else. So Darius Slay isn't a Steeler yet. I mean, I remember a few years ago when it was reported he signed with the Ravens, and all of a sudden he's back with the Eagles. So I'm a little apprehensive to dive too much into Darius Slay and what he could bring to the Steelers until that whole thing becomes official. Because right now it seems to still be pretty up in the air. But they added Malik Harrison. He took over for Trenton Simpson midway through the year for the Ravens last year at linebacker. Kind of guy that struggled in pass coverage, but decent run defender. A ton of special teams value. I mean, played like over 80% of special team snaps for the Ravens last year. So, to what, 2 years, 10 million base. I like it even just for the special teams alone. He can even play outside as like a fourth or fifth outside linebacker if they need him to. He's got the body type for it. So, don't necessarily hate that move just from the special teams alone. And Slay, we'll see. I mean, the corner market's kind of past Pittsburgh by, so if they don't sign Slay, it's going to be a little interesting to see what they do at corner. Maybe it becomes more of a priority in the draft, but then on the same time, the defensive line market's passed them by, and they haven't done anything there, and so that's also a huge priority in the draft. So next few days are going to be pretty interesting. The depth pickups, I think the quarterback domino needs to fall first before they kind of dive into adding anybody else. But definitely a slow start for the guys they've brought in. And I mean, as far as the guys who left, not really any surprises there. Dan Moore, Najee Harris, James Daniels, Dante Jackson, kind of the big names. Dan Moore gets the Steelers a third round comp pick because he signed a mega deal with Tennessee. Najee might be like a 6th round comp pick. James Daniels is like teetering between a fifth and a sixth. Dante Jackson, I think, was maybe a sixth as well. So the Steelers are going to actually have some comp picks for the first time in few years, some like actual significant comp picks with a third for more. So that'll be good. But yeah, no surprises in the guys that left, really. Still a few guys out there that maybe they look to bring back. And Landon Roberts, too, he left, which was kind of expected after they reworked Holcomb's deal and brought in Harrison. Harrison was kind of the final nail in the coffin for Roberts, which is a move I think that maybe they'll end up regretting. I like Landon Roberts a lot, what he brings to the table, but he will now go to Vegas. And minority owner Tom Brady was his former teammate in New England.
Yeah, it looks like no other team other than the Steelers. It looks like the Steelers and the 49ers are the two teams that have maxed out their potential compensatory draft picks for the 2026 draft. You can only have four. So the Steelers currently have five they have six compensatory free agents lost, one gained. So they have a total of five compensatory picks on the board. One of those won't matter. So one of those six will probably be wiped out. Obviously, if they make some more signings, that could change things. Darius Slay won't count against it because he'd need to be released, and that doesn't count against. Aaron Rodgers, same deal. Obviously, DK Metcalf was a trade, and so Malik Harrison canceled out the Landon Roberts for a seventh round comp pick, but that wouldn't have mattered anyways because that's beyond their top four. Najee Harris is, I guess he was initially reported at a higher number that came in a little lower. His comp pick is now, like you said, teetering. Most likely a sixth. If he hits the incentives, it could be a fifth. So right now, the Steelers are looking at a third round comp pick, a fourth round comp pick for Justin Fields, a fifth round comp pick, a potential fifth for Najee Harris if he hits the incentives. We don't know what it is. They did say it's rushing yards. I don't, maybe he hits partial and then it'll be kind of a borderline fifth or sixth. So we're looking at a third, a fourth, and either 2 sixths or a fifth and a sixth. Then if you ask me, that is probably by design, given that the Steelers will be A, in the market for a quarterback next year, and B, obviously they will be hosting the draft. Could they use a lot of these compensatory picks, which became tradable within the last few years, to package up and move up to, get aggressive in the first round and kind of get their quarterback of the future? At this point, they're between Rodgers and Wilson. They pretty much need to draft a quarterback either this year or next year. Could they? It seems like they're interested in some of the guys this year, so I guess we can't totally discount it. But in my opinion, if they draft someone this year, it'd be like a Mason Rudolph or a Landry Jones, kind of like long-term backup situation. Maybe they have the upside. Maybe you get lucky. Anything can happen with these draft picks. But more than likely, we will see them, I think, maybe just kind of a prediction. Some of these compensatory picks are going to get packaged together, and the Steelers are going to make a move up for a guy next year. In terms of some of the other things, like you said, the defensive line market has passed the Steelers up at this point. That was kind of surprising to me. I thought they would need to sign one and draft one because you've already cut Larry Ogunjobi. Cameron Hayward's, up there in age. I think he's turning 36 in a couple of months or something like that, in May or June or something like that. So he will be 36 by the time the next season starts. And so you need a guy to replace Ogunjobi, and you also need a guy to eventually replace Hayward. And these we saw last year, these defensive line classes don't come around very often. Last year, there was basically nobody that the Steelers could have used at the top of the draft. There was Mason Smith from LSU, but he went way higher than he should have. And that was because there was no defensive lineman. And so in a year like this, where there are just 20 or 30 guys in the draft that are, have draftable grades, you have to take advantage. And, at this point, I think it's a complete lock that they have to take one in the first round, especially that now that you don't have a second round pick. And on top of that, do you consider taking another in the third? You might have to take a corner, but it's possible that you come out of day 1 and 2 with only 2 defensive linemen, which is kind of crazy to think about. But corners, there's still some names out there. Most of the market has passed them up. It's been expensive. It's moved fast. There are still a couple names. Defensive line, really, you're down to Levi. I don't even know how to say his last name. Onwuzurike, Calais Campbell, Malik. There's a few guys, but none of them are needle movers necessarily. And maybe Onwuzurike, you can kind of label him okay, he could be kind of a longer term guy. But obviously Calais Campbell's one of the oldest players in the league. He would be basically a 1-year kind of bridge. He was pretty productive last year. I think he had 5 sacks. He had I think he had double-digit kind of quarterback hits and decent tackles for loss. Calais Campbell is, kind of an ageless wonder, just like Cam Hayward. And so maybe an interesting pick. It seems like the Steelers have kind of rolled the dice on these Hall of Fame type guys at the end of their career in the past. They've done it with Patrick Peterson and other guys. So I wouldn't be shocked if that ends up being the move. I mean, they need there aren't that many, but they do need to sign one. They can't rely on one or two rookies and put that much pressure on them to perform right away. I mean, Cam Hayward barely played at all his rookie year. These defensive linemen need time to kind of get in the NFL weight room and learn the Steelers 3-4 kind of base system. It's not easy for these defensive linemen. You got a 2-gap. It's a difficult job, and so I would not be comfortable at all if they're going into the season with relying on a first-round draft pick to play 75, 80% of the snaps. So that's just where I'm at. But I think that kind of wraps up the discussion in terms of these 3 topics. Joe, is there anything else there that we didn't hit on?
No, wraps up for me as well.
Great. Well, we will get into our question here from Brett. Brett from San Angelo. Thank you for giving us a call. Here's the question.
Hello, Depot Dive. This is Brett from San Angelo. And my question or just quick discussion point is, I think that the team should definitely double dip at defensive line, but short story is they need to consider double dipping at running back. Reality is this is a running back sneakily is probably the weakest position on the team. You have one guy who might be under contract if another team doesn't try to poach him off the tender. Nobody else you really want on the team at this point come week 1. Nobody under contract under 2026. The reality is I think their estimates are 35 plus, depending on who you ask, draftable running backs. So some team is going to have to take 2. To me, it should be the Steelers. They should get 1 home run hitter, 1 kind of workhorse back, 2 guys that can kind of both play on special teams. And in a draft that is deep, like this one, maybe one of those 2 7-round picks should be a second running back. Love to hear your thoughts, or if you kind of agree. Talk to you later.
All right. Thank you, Brett, for the question. He's saying we were just talking about the double dip at defensive line, but more his question was about running back. Could the Steelers be in the market for a double dip at running back? I get what you're saying, Brett. I do, because Jaylen Warren technically could be signed away, but I think it was like Jerry Dulac said he was expecting a first refusal tender on Warren. If they had done that, then more than likely, yeah, he could have been signed elsewhere. I don't think anybody's going to be willing to give up a second-round pick. As you said, Brett, there are 35-plus draftable running backs in this draft. Why would you give up a second-rounder for Jaylen Warren, who's, don't get me wrong, I like Warren, but is he a top 10 running back even? I mean, that if you're giving up a second-round pick, it better be basically a top 10 kind of running back. And I don't know if I view or if anyone else views Jaylen Warren that way. Now, he is great all around. He can receive. He absolutely is great at pass blocking. And I think he's a good fit for Arthur Smith's system. I think he probably is due to have a pretty good year. That being said, we've never seen him be in the true workhorse role. And neither has anybody else. So why would they give up a second-round pick? So I'm leaning no on double dipping at running back, especially now that they have 1 less draft pick to work with. That being said, in the 7th round or even the 6th round, now that they have that 6th as a result of that DK Metcalf trade at the swap there, if they get a guy like, I don't know, Damian Martinez or one of these kind of bigger, kind of more bruising guys in the 3rd or the 4th, I wouldn't be opposed to getting like a Marcus Yarns or one of these kind of quicker receiving type guys at the end of the draft. Or, I mean, I think just today we saw Zach Azani at Tennessee. He's the wide receiver coach. He was looking at another guy, but there was a shot of him watching Dylan Sampson, the running back there. He's a kind of a speedier, all-around kind of guy from Tennessee there. So yeah, I think there's different ways you could go. I wouldn't be like completely shocked if they had 2 that they double dipped, but I don't think it's a wise use of capital right now. Joe, agree, disagree?
I was gonna say the same thing because you just look at all these other positions that have to address, like defensive line, like cornerback, and yeah, I don't know if that's second round pick. So, um, I would be surprised because I do think they're gonna sign somebody else in free agency. I mean, even right now, Cordell Patterson's still on the roster. We'll see if he stays on the roster, but he's still on the roster. You sign somebody else and then you draft a guy. I would be surprised if they took two running backs. Um, but yeah, I mean, one of the seventh round picks, if there's somebody there and that you think is a lot better than anybody else you could get that could play a role, then sure. I mean, it wouldn't completely shock me. I just don't see it happening right now, given their other needs and what they have for picks.
Yeah, and what Brian Baldinger today said, maybe they go after a guy like Kenneth Gainwell. Maybe they do end up signing one, and then certainly you wouldn't be drafting two if you sign one. Cordell Patterson's technically still on the roster. We'll see what happens there. Right? I didn't miss something there. He's still on the roster, so they've technically got Warren and Patterson, and until something happens there, I guess working under the assumption that maybe Patterson will return. I don't think, well, maybe probably not, but he's still around, so who knows at this point. He has a good rapport with Arthur Smith, and he showed flashes last year before he got injured, so maybe I don't know what to think about that whole situation. But all that to say, I don't think so, Brett, but thank you for the question. If you want your question answered, please do give us a call, 412-254-3145. You can also text that line, leave us a text. We will answer a question that way, but we do ask you leave us your name and where you're from, just so we can put a name to the question. And that is all for today's episode. I'm Ross, that's Joe, and we will catch you guys next time.